Hello everybody, this is Richard from Janus, and today we're going to talk about the first start of your Janus 250. So if you are expecting delivery of your new 250 or have just received your bike, this is a great resource for you to go through all the different things that are unique to a Janus. And even if you're unfamiliar with motorcycles in general, this is a great starting point with your 250. This will cover, we're going to be using a Halcyon, but this will be applicable to any of our 250 lines, so the Halcyon, the Griffin, or the Phoenix. All right, so we're going to start with looking at the controls on the bike. We'll start on the left handlebar. The thing you're going to probably use the most will be your clutch. So this is your clutch lever, and that it will disengage the clutch. You have your high beam and low beam. So to engage the high beam, here, I'll actually turn it on. To engage the high beam, click that, and you'll have an indicator light, which we'll cover in a minute, on your dash, as well as a blue light here showing the high beam is on. So now it's off. Next up is your turn indicator switch. So it's very simple. Push it right to trigger your right turn indicator, or left to toggle the left indicator. It's a center push to cancel, which means all you have to do is just push straight in, and that cancels it. It's not an auto-canceling indicator, so you will need, once you've finished your turn, you need to hit that button. Otherwise, you could be riding along with your turn indicator on, which could be dangerous. A car might think you're turning, and just want to always remember to cancel your turn indicator. Below the turn indicator is the horn button. You know how to use that. On the right side of the handlebars, you have your front brake lever. This engages the front brake. Next, you have the kill switch. So this is on the right-hand side. If you want to kill the bike, all you have to do is hit that, and that will kill the engine. It's nice to have. Just one thing, if you're starting the bike and it won't turn over, double check that the kill switch is in the on position. Below that is the engine electric starter switch. So if you hit this, it's going to engage the electric starter and start the bike up. Next up, we'll cover the instruments and key switch. So your key switch it's in the on position now, we'll turn it off. It has 4 positions. Off, where you can pull the key out, and when you turn it to off, everything is all the electronics on the bike are shut off. So this is where you want to leave it if you are storing your bike for any period of time. On, it needs to be in the on position in order to run. So it has to be in on either to use the electric starter or the kick starter. The next position is lock. So if we have this bike on a stand, so I can't turn the handlebars, but what you want to do is turn the handlebars to full lock all the way left. So turn them all the way to the left, and then you can turn this, you push in once, and then turn that to lock, and that will lock your handlebars all the way to the left. I wouldn't say it's a theft proof, but it would be a great deterrent and keeps the steering locked to the left. One more click will put you in what we call park. It's labeled P on the lock, and that continues, it lets the bike still be locked. The steering lock is still locked. However, it engages the tail light only. And that is there because if you, let's say, need to stop on the side of the road and you need to leave the bike, this will allow you to keep a light on for safety without the headlight draining your battery. So this is a great way to, if you needed to kind of have an indicator light on with minimal power drain, you can put it in the park position. One thing to be aware of is if you go to lock your bike, you can accidentally click it one click further to the park position and leave that on and drain your battery. It will drain the battery eventually. So just be aware when you do put it to the lock position that you're not going all the way to the park unless you intend to. So we'll put it back to the off position for now. Next up, we go to the instrument cluster. On this bike, on the 250, It's very, very simple, pared down to the minimum of what you need. It has a speedometer, so this is going to indicate your ground speed in miles per hour. It also has a neutral indicator, so this little green N means that you are in neutral. And that's very helpful if like you're coming to a stop and you want to find neutral. Or if you're in first, we can shift it down to first, it goes off. So if you want to start the bike, you need to have it in the neutral position. Next up, it has the turn indicator light here, and that will help remind you that your turn indicator is on. It's a single light that indicates both left and right. So it's not going to tell you which indicator is on, it's just that it's on. So you can just center push to cancel that. And the last indicator light on there is your high beam light. So that shows that your high beam is on or off. Next up in the LCD screen here, this is your date time setting. And you can toggle to the next function with this button right back here. It's a momentary single push button, and we'll cycle through here and show you the different functions. So this is the ambient temperature in Fahrenheit. One more click gets you to your battery voltage. So this shows you the battery voltage. If you start the bike up, obviously that's going to increase to the normal operating voltage. But this is a great thing to check if you've left the bike for a while and maybe it isn't starting as well. You can see if it's got the right battery voltage. 13 is a great place to be. That's where it should be. Next up, we have the odometer. This is a brand new bike, so there are 0 miles on the clock. This is total miles traveled on this machine. Then you have some trip meters. So this would be trip 1. You can't reset the odometer, but you can reset your trip meter. So let's say you want to know how far you're gone for a day, or you want to keep an eye on how much fuel you have. The 250 doesn't have a fuel gauge, so this is a great way to know how far you can travel on a tank. We recommend that you kind of establish that on your own, but we average about 60 miles to the gallon with a 2-gallon tank, so that's a kind of do the math. It really does depend on the rider though, so we recommend you establish that for yourself. But you can do that with the trip meter. These are some trip stats, elapsed time, and stuff like that. Then you got a second trip meter. So you can do 1 trip meter for fuel and 1 for total trip distance if you're on a multi-day trip. And there's the stats for that. One more click, and we're back to date and time. So those are all the functions on the LCD screen. One thing to note, though, I'm not sure I covered this, is if you're in the odometer or trip meter, to reset it, you push and hold that down, and that will reset the trip meter. Next, we'll cover the foot controls on the 250. On the left-hand side, right ahead of the foot peg, you'll find your shift lever. The shift pattern is noted on the engine case. It's 1 down, 4 up. So that means first gear, so you're in neutral, and you go down 1, you're in first gear, and then 1 full click up will take you through neutral to second, and then it's 3, 4, 5 from there. On the right side of the bike is the rear brake lever, and that's operated obviously with your right foot. While we're on this side of the bike, we can go right into talking about some of the other parts of the right side of the bike. This is your kickstart lever. This will fold out. The other thing to notice on this side of the bike is your oil viewport. The oil viewport gives you a really good quick indication of how much oil, if you have enough oil in the bike. We always fill the bikes when they leave all the way to the high line. So that's why this is full of oil. If it ever gets below the low mark, so you have an H and an L, high and low, that means you do need to put more oil in the bike. Oil is added through the oil port here, which also has a dipstick. And I'll show you that. We do not typically use the dipstick as a way of testing how much oil you have. The viewport is a pretty foolproof way to do that, and doesn't require removing this, but you can also use this level, and this operates just like the high and low on your viewport. Has a little O-ring on there to make sure that nothing leaks out. One thing to note when you are checking your oil is that if the bike is not sitting vertical, it will not read accurately. So if you say have it on the side stand, which would mean that it was leaning away from us, it's going to read lower than than the proper reading. So always make sure that the bike is held vertical. It's often really helpful to have a second person hold the bike while you're checking the oil viewport. The other thing to note is that when the bike is running, so like at a stoplight and you peek over and see the oil, check your oil viewport, it's going to read low because all that oil is up in the engine doing exactly what it's supposed to. So the engine does need to be turned off and have sat for, I don't know, a minute and a half or so to allow the oil to drain down and for you to get an accurate reading. So don't be upset if you're riding the bike and you notice that the oil is a little low. All right, next up we're going to cover fueling on your 250. The single most common question and issue we run into with our service department is low fuel. So it's really important when you receive your Janus to, first thing to do once you have gone through your inspection and first start, to go fill it up with fuel. We supply the bike. It will arrive to you with the minimum amount of fuel that we need to do our certification and then ship it. We're only allowed to ship it with a small amount of fuel in the tank. So that's just there to get it to you and probably a first start. Then you need to go straight away and fill it up. If you are having issues with the bike not running or not starting well when you first received it, top up your fuel tank. Again, that is the most common issue we run into. So first off, just wanted to talk a little bit about how the fuel tank functions. This is a diagram or a cross-section through a 250 fuel tank showing the filler neck. And the filler neck, if we take the fuel cap off here, extends 2 inches down into the tank. And that's designed that way for a reason, because it gives you an indication of when to stop filling the bike. So this is when the fuel in your tank reaches the bottom of the filler neck, that's when you need to stop putting more gas in it. If you continue to fuel the bike after that, you can get fuel splashing out of the top, or if you get to a certain point, it will actually run down the vent tube. So there's a tube inside there that releases the vacuum caused by the fuel going into your carburetor. And if that fuel level gets above the bottom of here, it can go down that vent tube and end up in a little puddle underneath the bike. So if you have fueled your bike and you notice a pool of gas under it, that's probably what's happened. It's there for a reason. This is your fuel cap. When fueling the bike, it's important to make sure that you keep this as clean as possible. If you have saddlebags, where I usually rest this is on the left side. The bike will be leaning on the side stand on top of the saddlebag, right like that. It's a great place to keep it clean rather than putting it on the ground or letting it get dirty. We have a full video going over the proper procedure for fueling your Halcyon to limit getting gas on the tank or other parts of the bike. And I recommend you check that out. We'll link that here from this video. Next up is how your fuel valve or the petcock actually works. So if we come over on this side of the bike, we can take a look at the petcock. The petcock has 3 positions. Right now it is in the on or kind of run position, which makes a lot of sense because it's in line with the fuel line. So that means it's on. So if I actually turn it to the off position now, you can see it says on there and off when it's over here. So off will cut off all fuel getting from the fuel tank to the carburetor. If you are winterizing your bike and you want to drain the carburetor, you want to put this to the off position before you drain the carb. Then the next position is the reserve, which is marked R on here, which is all the way to the back. And reserve functions to add a little bit more fuel. If you, let's say you run out of gas, you don't have a fuel gauge on your 250. So if you were to run out of fuel, flip it to R and you have a little bit more gas. It's about 10 to 15 miles worth of gas that'll get you to a gas station. Once you do fill up, we do recommend that you flip it back to the on position so that you will have that emergency reserve for next time. Last thing on fuel is what grade of fuel and what kind of fuel to use. This is all of our 250 motorcycles are carbureted, which means that they're going to work better with ethanol-free fuel. Now, it doesn't mean they're going to run any better. If you put ethanol fuel, that's perfectly fine. Up to 10% or E10, I think is the what they call it. Don't put E15 or higher ethanol. That won't work as well. But regular ethanol fuel will work fine in here. The issue that carbureted bikes have with ethanol is that it can gunk up a carburetor. If you have a lawn mower or something like that, you may already be familiar with that. So if you're storing the bike for, we say, a month or more, we recommend using either ethanol-free fuel or a fuel stabilizer or additive that will help stabilize the fuel, because ethanol fuel does break down faster and take on water, which is not good for a carbureted engine. So run anything, any fuel. If you run into a gas station and they don't have ethanol free, that's fine. But if you're storing it, take the time to either fill it up with ethanol free or add an additive to protect your fuel. Next up, we'll talk about the choke. This is, as we've just said, a carbureted bike, so it will require choke to start. The 250 line is a little cold-blooded. It meets 50 state emissions, and that just means that it takes a little to get warmed up, and you will need to use the choke. Once it is warmed up, our calibration is spot on. It runs right where it needs to be. It's not lean, but it does require the choke to start. So we'll cover that now. The choke is 3 positions. Down is run. So once you get the bike warmed up, you want it in the down position. If you run the motorcycle with the choke even in half or full position, which it won't sound very good, you can foul your spark plug. To start the motorcycle, you're going to flip it through half choke all the way to full. So that's all the way up. That's full choke. And then once the bike has run for 30 seconds to a minute, you'll hear the exhaust note change and you flip it down to half choke, let it run for another minute or so, and then once it's fully warmed up, you can flip it to the run position and you are good to go. On the right side of your bike is this beautiful leather cover. Take the snap off there, you'll see that you have that's where your battery is located. All 2022 model year bikes have a lithium battery. Very high performance EarthX battery comes stock on them. One other thing you should be aware of on your 250 Janus is throttle or idle speed adjustment. If you look right behind the actual throttle assembly, there's a little flathead screw. And as your motorcycle brakes in, the idle speed can drop. And so you can use that screw to adjust it. Now we're going to cover the starting procedure for your Janus 250. First thing we're going to want to do is perform an inspection of the bike to make sure that it's ready for the road. We recommend using the Motorcycle Safety Foundation's T-Clocks inspection checklist. That's an acronym, and this can be found on the MSF or Motorcycle Safety Foundation website under their, I think it's under the library. It's a free PDF download. But T-Clocks stands for, the T is tires and wheels, so you're going to want to inspect those, tire pressure, etc. C is controls, making sure your controls are all operating. So just like a pre-flight inspection, making sure that your headlight works, tail lights works, etc. And then electronics, so that's actually where you would check the lights. O is for oil and other fluids. Make sure you have enough fuel for your ride. Make sure the oil level is topped up, etc. And then C is chassis. Check for any kind of irregularities, cracks, or anything that you wouldn't want to have on a motorcycle. And finally, S for stands. So that would be your side stand on a Janus. Make sure that it's operating properly, that it's not bent or cracked. So if you want to go through this whole list, again, available on the MSF site, it's a great way to ensure that your bike is ready to hit the road. After you've performed the initial inspection of your bike, the first thing you're going to do is sit on it and then put your side stand to the up position. There is no interlock on the 250 side stand, so you're going to want to remember to do that. It could cause a dangerous situation if you accidentally leave that down. Next up, we're going to put the choke to full choke, so that's all the way up. I'm going to turn the key on. You can, at this point, check your mirrors, make sure everything is adjusted properly. Then make sure that your kill switch is in the run position. So it's shown by a little circle turning around. It's also the down side. So hit that kill switch in the off. The kill switch is not engaged. And then right below that is your ignition switch. We do recommend that it's good practice to pull in the clutch lever. So in case there was a false neutral light on your dash, the bike won't lurch forward. We are in neutral. The neutral light is showing that we're in neutral, so that it has to be in neutral to start. And then we want to not give it a whole lot of gas at the first start. So what we recommend here is barely crack the throttle. So maybe a 16th or an 8th turn and hit the gas. Once you hit the gas, then you're going to roll on and kind of give it a little gas and kind of baby that throttle until the bike is running. So I'm cracking the throttle. We're going to hit the starter. And then I'm babying the throttle now. And then gradually let the clutch out. We know the clutch. We are in neutral. And the bike sounds a little rough. That's because the throttle, or the choke is fully engaged. So we're going to go ahead and half choke. You can hear the RPMs go up. It sounds better. The same thing's going to happen as it gets warmer now. It's going to get a little more ragged. And this bike has been sitting inside, so it's pretty warm, so it's not going to take very long to warm up. All right, now we're in the run position. And sometimes you need to baby the throttle on the 250 until it's fully warmed up. But it seems like it's pretty good to go. That's the basic starting process. Next up, we'll talk a little bit about the break-in process of your Janus 250. This is a brand new bike. There's almost no miles on it or 0 miles on the odometer. So the engine is brand new, the brakes are brand new, everything is fresh from the Janus headquarters. So you're going to want to follow a proper break-in procedure to ensure good engine life, the long life of your bike. If you jump on a brand new bike or car and really rev it out and kind of abuse it from day one, it can really damage the engine. The piston rings need to seat, the brakes need to seat properly. So a good break-in process will serve you in the long term. We recommend for the first 500 miles, that is what we define as the initial break-in of your 250. Now, what you're going to notice over the course of that break-in is the bike's going to gain power. It's going to feel stronger. It's going to get smoother. If you did have any false neutrals at first, the transmission's going to break in. Those are going to go away. And that break-in process, that increase in power will extend. When I rode cross-country, I was still noticing it at 1,500 miles, getting more powerful. So it does continue to smooth out, but that first 500 miles is really where we request that you take extra care with the bike. That means giving it plenty of time to warm up. So that process I just showed you, take your time with that. Let the bike really come up to temperature and baby that throttle. It's going to be harder starting, and it's not going to idle as well during that break-in process. So it's perfectly okay if it won't hold an idle after 2 minutes of warming it up. That's okay. You just need to let it warm up longer. And once at the 5-minute point, you can hop on the bike and get going, and then it's really going to warm up and be fine. Once you're out on the road riding your bike during the break-in period, we recommend that you don't go full speed. It's best to vary the RPMs, and kind of around town riding for that first couple hundred miles is ideal. It kind of gets the engine able to go through all the different RPMs, all the different gears, and gradually break it in. Going out and hitting the interstate at 60 miles an hour for an hour is probably not the best thing you're going to do to the bike during the break-in period. Other things to notice when you first received your bike is you may notice smoke coming off the exhaust header. That is the anti-seize compound we use for the O2 sensor port. It's perfectly okay, and it will burn off within 2 or 3 minutes of riding and won't happen again. So just be aware of that. Other things that will break in, I mentioned brakes. Most manufacturers state that their brakes take at least 100 miles to fully seat, which means that the pad mates to the surface of the rotor. And so it's good practice to just kind of anticipate when you need to stop and take it easy as you break in your brakes. Same thing goes true of tires. There can still be mold release compound on the tires. Let those tires break in and kind of scrub the surface before you start cornering harder or anything like that. So that covers most of the things you need to be aware of with the break-in of your 250. The next thing we'll talk about is the maintenance schedule on your Janus 250. If you open your owner's handbook, it's basically the center page is your maintenance schedule, and it covers everything that you're going to need to take a look at. So there's some things that you want to check at delivery. So for example, engine oil, check at delivery. Next one on the list would be check for leaks in your fuel system. So there's some things you want you to take a look at once you've received the bike, and then other things at the service interval. The service interval, the most important maintenance that you're going to do is the 500-mile maintenance. So that is your break-in period is over, and all kinds of things will have seated, like we talked about, including things like your drive chain will have stretched a little bit. It's brand new. It's going to stretch out. Hardware can loosen up. And so it's really important at that 500-mile mark to go through the 500-mile maintenance. And that is all listed here in the handbook. And you can either do that yourself. We do fully support owners doing their own work as long as you think you're up to the task, or we can put you in touch with a local service shop that can perform that maintenance as well. From there out, the next service interval is at the 1,000-mile mark. Then it's at 2,000, 4,000, and 6,000 continuing. So a 2,000-mile service interval. We recommend servicing the bike either at that mileage or every year is a good interval to keep in mind. Next up, we'll talk about battery maintenance. This is a really important topic that will provide you the best use of your motorcycle and keep you from having to replace the battery every year. So we recommend that if the bike is going to be put away for a month or more, that you put the battery on a tender. This is a lithium battery on the 2022 and newer 250s. So you'll need to get what we call a smart charger. It will say on the packaging or wherever you find one that it's designed for a lithium battery, and it has special programming on board that will automatically shut off the charge when it is topped up. But it's really a great way to extend the battery life. You can get many years out of a single battery if when you put it away, you put it on a charger. They make, most battery tenders come with a kit that you can bolt onto the battery terminals, and has a little pigtail and a quick connect on there, a little SAE plug. We stow that out the back, and then when you pull the bike into your garage, even for a short period of time, you can just take the other end of the terminal of the charger, plug it in, and you know that your battery is being perfectly tended. And that's essential for if you're storing your bike over the winter. Batteries do lose, depending on the battery type, significant amount of charge when they just sit. And so it's a great way to be able to start that bike right up in the spring and not have any battery issues if you keep it on a charger. So we highly recommend a battery tender. One other thing to be aware of with your Janus, if you're planning on traveling with it or transporting it, is some good practices when leaving it outside or exposed. We do recommend that you take the saddlebags off the bike when you're traveling, especially if you're going to get any rain there. Same thing is true with the seat and battery cover. The seat, we recommend that you leave on the bike, as we do with the battery cover. Take a plastic bag, wrap it around there. I use tape typically and just tape it on there, and that's going to protect your leather work, so even if you go through a rainstorm. Same with the battery cap. The saddlebags come off fairly easily. There's a spring-loaded clip on the bottom that you unclip, and then these are kind of belt buckle style buckles on the back that you can then access and remove. One thing to be aware of on the the right saddlebag is that your wire for your taillight follows along behind that. You want to go in between the frame and that. Don't wrap around the electrical wire because you could damage it that way. Other than that, we do not recommend that you use a cover on the bike if it is going to be outside in the wind on a vehicle, because that cover will flap and can damage the paintwork. It's better to just cover the seat and battery cap and strap it down properly, and do not use a full cover on the bike. Well, congratulations on your new Janus 250. The most important thing to be aware of is if you have any issues, we are here to help. Give us a call or email and we'll get you taken care of. Thanks a lot.